And Brandon, we are getting to the end of the podcast. We got 2 teams left. One of those being the Penn State Nittany Lions. And I think the first question with this team is very simple. And I'm going to ask you right off the cuff. How does this team, let's be honest, they're going to be bottom of the Big Ten East this year. How can they recover after losing Saquon Barkley? It's just too big of a loss. They're going to be at the bottom of the division, right?
No.
Right? They just can't overcome this loss. Am I right?
No, they can.
That is huge sarcasm, by the way,
can.
for people who don't understand sarcasm. Just how are they going to overcome the loss of Saquon Barkley?
Well, I think it's number one, you really turn the ball over to Trace McSorley.
Mm-hmm.
And you say,
it's his team.
Trace, you do what you've been doing the last couple of years, and now just do it even more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's what they've got to be saying to him. You know those passes you've been throwing to Jawan Johnson? Keep throwing them and throw a lot more. And I don't want to say that they're going to be, completely, we're going to a pass-heavy offense where Trace is going to have 4,500 yards because we made him throw it that much. No. But I think that we're certainly going to continue to see how good McSorley is and how many options and how many weapons he has at his disposal to be able to do that. And then you also look at a guy in the backfield in Miles Sanders. And it just sounds like a football name. I mean, if
sounds, only his name was Barry,
it just
then it'd be the ultimate football
like a football name. So, and it's not because I thought, I'm thinking of Barry Sanders, but just Miles Sanders sounds like a football name. And we're looking at him, who in his first 2 seasons, he averaged 6.7 yards on 56 carries. So I think that you look at him and you know that he's not going to be what Saquon Barkley was. You're not going to make up for everything that Saquon Barkley did. He's not going to be this guy who can throw passes, who's going to return everything, who's going to be outstanding out of the backfield, that's going to be a running back and do it all well. I'm not saying that's going to be him, but I'm also not saying that he's going to only be able to run the ball effectively or something along those lines. You've got a talented running back now, whereas Saquon Barkley was, I think they've already enshrined him in Canton, and that's very early. But for a guy who was such a stud player, and they talk about 5-tool players in baseball. I mean, this is a 5-tool guy in college football. And he did it all well. Everything he was asked to do, he did it. But now that he's not there is no reason to have concern or be concerned if you look at this offense. And if anything, where you may look for how will they be, where you may wonder, are they going to get the same production that they got? Are they going to be happy with where they're at, is defensively. Because offense looks pretty good. Well,
and the thing about the running game that is going to be vastly different from last year is, I don't know if you said this stat, so I'll say it. Saquon Barkley accounted for 32.8% of Penn State's all-purpose yards. All the yardage, he accounted for almost 33% of all the yardage last year. And, I mean, this year, even Coach James Franklin has said that he expects to use more of a rotation this season than they did last year. Because last year, you look at the stats, Saquon Barkley had everything. Miles Sanders only had 31 carries last year. Mark Allen only had 9 carries last year. Those are 2 of the guys that you're going to hear called this year. It's just going to be more of a committee to me for the Penn State running backs. You're going to have Mark Allen. You're going to have Miles Sanders. You're going to have Jonathan Thomas. You're going to have Journey Brown. You're going to have true freshman Ricky Slade out there, which I love that name. Not only is his first name Ricky, but that last name Slade is just real slick and rolls right off the tongue. One of my favorite names to say this year. The only question with him is he's a true freshman. So if they don't play him enough, will they just redshirt him at the end of the year so he keeps some eligibility? And this is the thing that shocks me because of Saquon Barkley last year. Do you know what ranking the Nittany Lions were in the Big Ten and FBS and rushing last year? Because these numbers shocked me because Saquon Barkley was their running back. They were the 6th best rushing attack in the Big Ten, and they ranked 59th in all of the FBS and rushing last year. I looked at that and went, really? They're not even a top 50 rushing attack with Barkley? But then I think about it, Barkley was a dual threat guy. He didn't just run the ball. They were passing to him as well. So, I mean, I think this year it's going to be a lot more. We're getting back to the basics. We're getting back to running the ball. Yeah, we're going to pass a little bit to the running backs, but it's not going to be as much as they did with Saquon Barkley. Also, I'm going to compare this college team almost to the Dallas Cowboys in a sense, to where they're returning 4 offensive linemen. You want to run the ball, it's going to be good having experienced guys on that O-line to block for not just your quarterback, but for the stable of running backs that you'll have as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's another reason. That's just another reason why someone should believe, and why Nittany Lion fans, hopefully you're continuing to believe as well, that this team is going to be very good, and why this offense is going to continue to be in very capable hands. It's fun. It's really truly what as we continue to go through these previews, and now here on Penn State, we're at the third of the 4 big ones in the East. It's fun. It's just fun seeing how good all these teams are. And from a year ago where Michigan struggled, we should be looking at them and seeing, okay, they should be returning. You look at Michigan State. That's a team that 2 years ago struggled. They were back last year. They're continuing to be here. They'll continue to be around this year. The Nittany Lions and Penn State, a team that was really good last year, and that's with Saquon Barkley, and they end up number 2 in the East, 11-2 overall. It could have been better. Should have been better. This is a team that is still powering up and reloading with a lot of the same weapons they had last year. And yes, you say goodbye to Saquon Barkley, but like you said, Ricky, and this is no knock to Saquon, but even with him, you still weren't the number 1 rushing attack because he did it all. And now you're going to turn to something different, whether it's one guy, whether it's 2 guys, whatever it might be. You are still in such capable hands. If you're able to run behind an experienced offensive line, an offensive line with guys that are going to be able to create holes and allow you to do your job and break off big runs, you just continue to look. I think we're going to continue to see much of the same from Penn State this year.
Well, and the thing for me is before we get into the schedule, because I was kind of looking at that, I got one question about the defense to ask you. And that's the sense of the biggest question that they're going to have is they've got 2 tackle spots at defensive tackle that they're going to need to fill this year. And really people are going to look at it and go, oh, Kevin Givens and Windsor are going to be the guys that, they were backups last year. They're starters this year. But I mean, it's one of those things where, that's a big thing to fill because as we mentioned, some of that, I look at that, all right, the tackle spot. The first thing I think of on the offense is, all right, you got to replace your tackle spots. What kind of running backs are you going to go up against this year? Ohio State, who we have not talked about this yet, they're going to have a really good running back. We just talked about L.J. Scott for Michigan State. They're going to have a good running back. We mentioned Wisconsin last week. They're going to have a good running back. There are, the good teams in your division or the good teams on your schedule are going to have good running backs. You got to solidify this. And the good thing is, you don't play Ohio State till September 29th. You don't play Wisconsin until Dave's birthday, November 10th. Are you going to be able to solidify these 2 tackle spots by the time you play those teams? Because if you don't, these teams will run all over you and you'll lose those games.
Do you believe that?
Yes.
You think if they don't, these two guys,
if they're not solidified, I feel like there will be no push in the middle, and that will mean that, first off, an offensive line will be able to push forward and push. The worst thing you want is an offensive line for a defensive line is for the O-line to push you back. And I feel like if they're not able to get these two positions solidified, that's going to happen more often. Offensive lines are going to be able to get their footing against this team. More time for the quarterback, better opportunities for holes for the running back, and there's some dangerous running backs on this schedule for Penn State.
So defensive end tied for the Big Ten lead with an average of 3.2 sacks per game in 2017. That's something I'm real excited about. How can we be even better? That's what I'm thinking. If I'm the guys I'm looking at, how are we better? How are we going to improve from what was already outstanding? How are we going to be better? So that's clearly showing they put pressure on the quarterbacks last year. You would assume they're keeping a lot of the same. They're keeping a lot of the same guys in the same spots. They're adding some depth. That they're going to be around the same, if not better.
The thing I just worry about is, here's the worry I got in my head. Let's say that the weak spot, like I said, the two defensive tackle positions, if they're not as strong as you need it to be, all right, I'm going to run up the middle. Okay, to help out, I'm going to have the linebackers creep forward. First off, by running up the middle, you can have those ends coming off the outside. If I'm going up the middle, you guys are coming around, and you're not going to catch the running back quick enough. But also, it's going to throw off that edge getting to the quarterback because, all right, you're going to bring your linebackers in to help your weakened defensive tackles. All right, I am just going to play action you, and then my quarterback is basically, your edge rushers have to make a decision of, oh, crap, do I go and follow the run or do I go after the quarterback? And that, to me, could create problems for the Nittany Lions. Do I expect the defensive tackles to be a huge weakness and cripple this team? No, but it's a worry that I would have, especially with looking at the running backs, like I said, that they're going to see on their schedule, because like I look at the schedule and really there are 5 games that I'm looking at. There's a chunk of 2 and a chunk of 3 where you get September 29th, October 13th, you get Ohio State, and then you get Michigan State back to back. The good thing is you get a week off in between those games. So you play Ohio State, you get a week off, you play Michigan State. Then the 3 that I'm also looking at is Halloween weekend, you get Iowa, this time at home. Then the next week you're at Ann Arbor. Then the next week you're back home for Wisconsin. That Iowa game I'm only throwing in there because that could be a trap game for the Nittany Lions. The true 4 games are how do you do against Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. Because the big thing is they didn't have to play Wisconsin last year. They didn't have them on the schedule. This year they do. How do you do against those 4 teams, and can you avoid a trap game loss against a team like Iowa?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, obviously, with the game last year against Iowa. They won, but it was close, 21-19. And in the 2 games that they lost, that Penn State lost last year, their defense allowed the winning starting quarterback, when it was J.T. Barrett, he threw for almost 330 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns. Brian Lewerke from Michigan State threw for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. They're looking, I think Penn State looks better, more depth, and a year under their belt now in the secondary. And that's something that you don't want to see have happen again next year. But that's also, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster for you. If you allow them to get that much, you're going to be in a world of hurt. But Wisconsin being on this schedule, it's not fun. It's not fun because
they could throw a wrench into their
it could.
The reason why I say it could throw a wrench, and I don't mean to cut you off, but it could throw a wrench into their entire playoff, their entire Big Ten chances, because let's say they only lose one game between the Ohio State, the Michigan State, and the Michigan. But Ohio State, let's say they lose only one. They lose to Michigan State. Or no, they lose to Ohio State. All right, they're undefeated. Well, if you had a team like Purdue or Northwestern, I feel pretty confident that the Nittany Lions could win that game. Now you have Wisconsin. It's a greater chance of loss. You lose that game, it could be like, damn it, if we had only any other team from that division on our schedule, we would be in the Big Ten title game right now playing against the Wisconsin Badgers, not Ohio State. Like, that's what I think this game against the Badgers could possibly do to their end of the year chances at a Big Ten title.
Well, Wisconsin, we talked about them last week. They're loaded. Mm-hmm. They look really good.
Yep.
And actually poised to win.
That's why I
the Big Ten.
Keep mentioning them as they're just like, sorry, not sorry. They're my prediction to win the West. Like, I've mentioned it all preview. They're going to win the West. I'm sorry. Sorry to Matt mostly because it's going to be heartbroken.
But you look at these games, though. You play Ohio State and Michigan State and Wisconsin all at home. Mm-hmm. The only one of those games that you play on the road is Michigan. And that game, even on the road, I think you could get Michigan. So, and I'm not saying, because they're at home, they're going to win. But because they're at home, you've got maybe that sort of advantage. You've got the crowd advantage. Happy Valley's a fun place to play, and they've got some great fans. So it's one of those things where, as you've said a lot of the times, you give the edge to the team that's got the better quarterback. You give the edge to the team that's playing at home. It's nice when you look at that, and if it was Ohio State, Michigan State, and Wisconsin all on the road, it's like, dang. But because they're at home, it softens the blow a bit.
I'm going to say this. You know how I said for Michigan, the ceiling was undefeated? Penn State fans are not going to like me. The ceiling for this team is one loss. I don't see this team going undefeated into a playoff. If this team goes into a playoff, they lose one game, most likely to Wisconsin. If they're going to make the Big Ten title game, it's going to have to be Wisconsin. Because if you lose to Ohio State, it could be, you lost to us. We only lost one game. We own the tiebreaker. We get in, kind of a thing. And that's the ceiling. But realistically, I see this being a 2-loss team yet again. The losses being Ohio State and Wisconsin. I feel like at worst they're a 4-loss team. Like pick your 4 between Ohio State, Michigan State, Iowa, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Most people are going to pick all those teams except for Iowa in that case, but I'm still going to throw them in there because that's a trap game for me on the schedule. I feel like at worst they lose the big 4 games, most likely going to lose only 2 of those games, and at best they only lose 1 of them, but if they lose that one that I'm thinking about, Wisconsin, they still get the rematch clause in the Big Ten title game and could still possibly make the playoffs if they win the Big Ten in that capacity.
I think that they could be 10-3, 11-2 this year, and that actually could be good enough to get you the win over here in the East because of what we've talked about with this back and forth of beating each other up.
Just beat the crap out of each other.
We may see it, Ricky, where no team is undefeated.
Yep.
And we may see it where no team only has 1 loss. Because if you have a loss to one of the big 4 teams in the Big Ten East, no one's saying that another team couldn't come up and surprise you. Whether it is an Iowa, whether it's a Maryland team, whether it's an Indiana team, whether it's, Appalachian State, not going to happen, but, it could be one of those that potentially does it. So a team could be winning on this side of the conference with 2 losses.
And if last year proved anything, if the committee changes, like they're basically
weekly and daily,
weekly, daily, hourly, they change everything. But from what last year told me about the Big Ten, is if you have 2 losses, it does not matter if you win the conference. Does not matter. A 1-loss team from an SEC will get in over you. and it told me that if you're a one-loss Big Ten team, you better have that conference championship, because without that conference championship, you do not get into the playoff.
Well, did you look at the body of work though? Because that was 3 years ago, right?
Body of work, man. The body of work. But I mean, that's why to me the Big Ten, the Big Ten is the most interesting college football conference, because last year you could have made a case that Ohio State should have got in over Alabama because they had the conference title. Some people are trying to make the case that Wisconsin should have still gotten in because, Alabama doesn't have the conference championship. Why are we not at least 5 on the rankings or higher? So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But at the end, if I have to pick, I think this Penn State team might be a 2-loss team again, losing to Ohio State, losing to a Wisconsin.
I think that's, and I just want to chime in, and then I'm done. But I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. At the same time, it'll be interesting to see kind of where Ohio State's at in terms of, and I know we're getting to them.
We're going to get into them next.
But we're no longer seeing JT Barrett, and yes, you can say, well, they just kind of it's the next guy, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, did JT Barrett just transfer his skills and abilities to this next guy? But it'll be interesting to see if the top dog is still as top and dog as they have been.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section about the Penn State Nittany Lions. How far are they going to go this year? Are they going to be Big Ten East champs? Let us know what you think down below in that comment section.